Admir Selimovic is a researcher at Chair for CAD on Institute of Technology in Architecture on the ETH Zurich, and a lecturer at the Department of Architecture Theory and Philosophy of Techné here. He has been research fellow in digital mnemonics, a postmaster program focused on the philosophy of techniques and the principle of mathematical and computational thinking, conduced by Professor Ludger Hovestad at ETH Zurich and Vera Brühlmann at TU Vienna, and Professor Elias Zafiris of University of Athens. I hope I read more or less okay the Greek lines. He holds master's degree in architecture from the Institute of Art and Architecture of Fine Arts in Vienna, where he graduated with distinction, receiving the university's Achievement Award. We would like to start, if it's possible. Thank you. Let me help you to bring, yes.
I'm sorry? I'm very happy with this. Good afternoon. Thank you, Vera, for the invitation. I have a paper to read. It should take, I would say, about half an hour, not much more. So, mathematicians say, dealing with infinity. Infinity, we could assume, has always been dealt with. The pre-Socratics dealt with it while searching for causes and principles of the natural world and its phenomena. According to Aristotle, they claim that there is a single enduring material stuff, which is both the origin of all things and their continuing nature. Thales declared water to be that first cause. Anaximander's source is neither the water of his teacher, nor any one of the elements, but an original and an originating indefinite stuff, apeiron, a primordial mass from which all the heavens and the worlds in them come to be and to which they pass away. Anaximenes replaced apeiron with air. For Philolaus, the limitless is accompanied by the limiting. The cosmos is fitted together out of unlimited, unstructured stuffs, continua, and limiters that impose structures. If there is that which is without a limit, Melissus objected then there can be only that one thing, not two, or otherwise they would be limited against each other. To define the infinite as other than the finite is to set it apart from the finite and thereby limit it. To define the infinite is to make it definite and no longer infinite. The two, if there are two, would paradox one another. For the pluralist Anaxagoras, everything is in everything, in the original states and now. All things are together, unlimited both in amount and in smallness, for the small too is unlimited. The unlimited of Empedocles is in time, in the unending cycle of the competition between two forces, one that produces mixture and one that causes separation, both acting on four elements or roots of cosmos. The problem of relating the unlimited to the limited, the infinite and the finite, is reflected in the split between the continuous magnitudes of geometry and the discrete quantities of arithmetic. Due to this split, geometry and arithmetic are fundamentally different. Alfred Sohn-Wedel looked into this discord with an analogous one, the division between manual and intellectual labor. According to Herodotus, from whom he sources the historical account, geometry in ancient Egypt was practiced as a professional skill by those that the Greeks, translating the Egyptian name literally, called harpedonaptai, or stretchers of the rope. They were assigned usually in pairs to the high officials of the pharaoh for the construction of temples and pyramids, the laying down and paving of dams, the construction of granaries and measurement of their volume, and, most important, for parceling out the soil anew when it re-emerged after the dispersal of the yearly floods of the river Nile. The Babylonians, Zon Rettel says, had no geometricians, but rope stretchers, who measured only at the particular spot, according to the needs. Aside of the needs, the survey had no point. It would not leave behind any detachable demonstration of geometric content, a manual skill. Harpedonapti moved their ropes after each measurement from one location to another. The obtained results were bounded in time, or applicable only to the case in point. Geometric demonstration never came into question. Stretched rope realizes a line. Geometricians instead tend to idealize and leave a permanent figure from which geometric laws are to be recognized. The figures are not tied to a particular location. Their size is infinitely variable. A point for Euclid is not on any ground before or after any flood. It is that which has no part. A line is length without breadth. A plane is that which has length and breadth, etc. With the mathematicians of ancient Greece, geometry of measurement is unlike the measurement itself. It is a strive for an account of quantitative laws of abstract space or of numbers. The content of geometry is then independent, not only from a particular purpose, but from any particular or practical task. If the problem of relating the infinite to the finite is indeed in the split between the continuous magnitudes of geometry and the discrete quantities of arithmetic, a question asserts itself. How to transform from one to the other, that is, how to bridge the geometric continuum and the arithmetic discreteness. This is the problem of Eudoxus, who in his work on integration, in order to measure the area and the circumference of a circle, that is, to arrive at the arithmetic formula pertaining to the geometric figure, invents the method of exhaustion, a way of dealing with infinity. In the circle, he inscribes polygons sequentially, such that each one acquires twice the amount of edges than the previous one, then uses Pythagoras' theorem to calculate with devised triangles. The result is an approximation, whose accuracy is refined over time. Eudoxus is approaching infinity in time, infinity in which the length of that side of each triangle which is needed for the final calculation would assume the value of 0, and therefore the desired area and the circumference of a circle of any size would paradoxically turn out to be 0. This if the infinity would be affirmed as actual, but the method of exhaustion does not point to that. Infinity remains potential, unreachable, not in space, but in time, together with numbers. The split between geometry and arithmetic remains, but there is a bridge now whose crossing is charged with a toll, the ratio of accuracy over time. Quite a contrasted way of thinking infinity to the one of Eudoxus is the one of Duns Scotus and Nicholas of Cusa. As much as it appears that the polygon in the method of exhaustion is becoming increasingly similar to the circle, it is becoming increasingly dissimilar as well, as the amount of points with every doubling of the polygon edges increases, moving further away from the square's 4. A comparative relation of the infinite to the finite is without meaning for Cusa. Where we find comparative degrees of greatness, he tells us, we do not arrive at the unqualifiedly maximum or infinite, because things which are comparatively greater and lesser are finite. Necessarily, such a maximum is infinite. And therefore, for him, approximation is an inadequate way of dealing with infinity. The circle is a different species from the line, he says. A non-circle cannot measure a circle, whose being is something indivisible. A line, on the other hand, is always further divisible. Therefore, the question of infinity is not the one of approximation, but of coinciding opposites and of equality. A circle on the one side of the scale, a line on the other, they balance. Empedocles' earth or water on one side, air or fire on the other. Galen's warm or moist on one, cold or dry on the other. Equality is then found in the balance of opposites, inverses, or in the states of symmetry. Such crystalline spaces are those that dispose temperaments. The space of temperaments is the one of declared equal adversarial inverses. Temperaments cannot be poorly balanced, or otherwise they are not temperaments. To temper is to moderate, to bring to a proper or suitable, stable state, to remove the excess, to restrain within due limits, to mix in due proportion, to regulate, rule, govern, manage. Georges Polti's 1912 study of temperaments, The Art of Inventing Characters, for its title, presents a forthright admission. There is no such a thing as character. Men have no character, Polti tells us, recalling the words of La Bruyère. Or if they do, it consists in having none which is constant, which does not belie itself, and in which they are always recognizable. They have opposing passions and contradictory failings. It is easier for them to unite extremes than to have a conduct, one part of which springs naturally from another. Characters are but appearances, Polti says, and proceeds with devising an instrument to conjure up a vivid presentation of those very appearances, to make them distinct, obvious, apparent, or simply to make characters present. He presents us with 4 temperaments, all conflicted by inversion, all in opposition with one another, pairs of them with other pairs as well. The bilious he declares the inverse of the nervous, the 2 encrypted by idealist. The 2 oppose another pair of attitudes, the sanguine and the lymphatic, centered at the materialist. As inverses, the 2 pairs make up an axis. The bilious and the sanguine he declares equal adversaries, whose center is the active. For the nervous and the lymphatic, it is the passive. The pairs are then symmetrical. There is an axis stretched by their opposing directions. The bilious and the lymphatic are objective, the sanguine and the nervous subjective. Another axis, the third, the last possible symmetry in Polti's constellation of temperaments. This is then a graph of a geometric figure with a state of symmetry in 3 axes. This figure is tetrahedron, the temperamental crystal of Polti. The tetrad of the temperaments and the triad of the axes along which they are symmetrized, the stability kept ulterior in Polti's exposition, a triangle whose vertices are the centers of 3 inversions: activity, passivity, ideality, materiality, and subjectivity, objectivity. A triad that conditions the symmetries of the 4 temperaments. Masterful in arguing for the 4 that fulfill the condition, the temperaments in Polti's construction are, however, but a geometric folly, an appearance themselves. It is helpful here to recall the original meaning of the word temperament. To temper is to mix or blend. In proto-medicine, temperaments are combinations of qualities, a product. They are not that which is mixed with first, as the common reading of the old medicine and its humors implies, a view that turns toward the blending of temperaments, which are in turn taken for granted. It is rather the temperaments are that which is already a blend, a hybrid, a mixture, in Polti's case, of 6 notions. One could even say qualifying adjectives, presented with the 3 inversions. One of those temperaments, when paired, confronted with any other, opposes it via 2 axes, but not according to the remaining third, one of whose directions both of them share, both are a blend of. Here we can make a distinction between characteristics and actions. Temperaments are commonly thought of as qualities. Actions might be read from or into them, but tempering is the actioning of qualities, or the adjustment of qualities by substituting that which is in the collision, or action, that is, what collides and produces. Each temperament is a blend, a product of a collision in which 1/2 of the total amount takes part, hence the symmetry. The 4 temperaments then stand symmetrical in 3 space, since each integrates a collision of 3, and since the 6 are equally represented in the combinations of 3. In temperaments, then, we find an oscillation produced by a collision of forces of differing directions. A temperament is already a dramatic character, and even a dramatic situation. No wonder, then, that Polti goes as far as to literally draw their portraits. It is important to note that he, in the discussion on the dramatic characters, in fact, works in the dramatic mode. That is, in presenting the origins, he, in fact, works mythically. Facing thousands of dramatic characters conceived between antiquity and his time, and with the aim of being able to account for every single one of them, Polti becomes a character himself. He has a desire, a want. While confronted with an overwhelming amount of evidence, he wants intelligibility. He is a playwright too, as he plots metaphors in order to arrive at the desired goal. We too are overwhelmed. We are overwhelmed with the amount of the world, by the ease of access, by that what we have access to. Our data are not infinite, they're big, maybe not even that. And we could ask whether ways of dealing with infinity in this way overcome the problem of dealing with many. We are presented with the question of architecture adequate to our data, to our time, as if such a question is new. Like Polti, the architects of the Renaissance were presented with one not unlike this while confronted with the evidence of ancient architecture, an archaeological evidence full of irregularities and big. Polti is not unlike Brunelleschi, who wants to inscribe such a legacy of differences within an intelligible geometric design scheme. The question, properly dramatic, is what does one want? To which a response in form of a personal objective within the global is expected. A want is an objective. It assumes different faces in terms such as goal, purpose, ambition, intention, desire, need, pursuit, endeavor. The questions come as what is one after? What is one trying to get? What is one doing? What is one avoiding? This question, regularly posed to actors about to embody a character, is by no means easy to answer. It is not painless to experience a want instead of merely representing or indicating it. This, in drama, is direction. Thales wanted to measure the height of the pyramid. The hint is helpful. The objective is cut off from all the others, an action and additionally a target that in drama always comes together with an obstacle. It is one, and it is the principal force of one character. It is one simple dramatic character. It is also one simple dramatic situation. In Poetics, Aristotle says that character is the kind of thing which discloses the nature of a choice. For this reason, speeches in which there is nothing at all, which the speaker chooses or avoids, do not possess character. A decision is demanded, and upon deciding, one is about to cut, split, design. Not for the characters which assume them, but for the dramatist. Directions, their targets and avoidances are, rather than an invention, a deliberate choice, a separation from all the other ones. In drama, one reads these from life. They can be read from an artifact too. Artifact as an evidence of a transformation, or a mythical metaphoricity, of a ritualistic metaphorical movement, dramatization, with a hypothesis that if it is an outcome of such a movement, once it emerged as a figure, functions as a symbol. In a way, the plan of the foundations of Rome, being both circular in shape and divided into 4 parts, is symbolic of the problem of squaring the circle. Drama is a thing one sees. There has to be a one to see. Even conflict itself is not dramatic until it is seen. With a table of evidence, one ought to uncover, discover, reveal, expose, disclose the hiding intention, straining, effort, precisely that which is in drama called direction. Obvious is that a distinction demands at least 2, and what is on the table are separate things. Separate, set apart then, any 2 from the rest. Let one be Michelangelo's design for the vestibule of the Laurentian Library. At the center is an architectural part, a staircase, which fills almost all of the space. A simple observation. At the time, 16th century, architecture adheres to nature, understood as the divine, and the classical architectural orders adhere to nature modeled geometrically. Nature which Michelangelo puts away while neglecting the orders, invents his own order, and in this, instead of striving for architecture that serves or transmits a narrative, is invested in the abstraction that the order itself or the code book is, inasmuch as it is a way of ensuring a certain kind of actualization or encoding, or asserting an intention turned rule for what the proper encoding should be, as he disregards the orders according to which architecture should be arranged, skips the intended representation of nature in the image of architecture, and designs an artifact that pays a tribute precisely and only to architecture itself. This, while the reading of the intention in the other artifact on our table, and to which we contrast it, which happens to be a design of a popular contemporary Swiss architect, the key to whose disposition in relation to the previous piece must clearly be the following, and as simple as the architect puts it himself. The garden is the centerpiece, and the architecture is its frame only. What is the issue here, considering that we are looking for intentions in artifacts? If we ask what is the objective in terms of action, what do the two architects do or want to do, we can with some assurance say that both want to celebrate. Their intention is then the same, but the objects, targets of the objective are distinctly different. One wants to celebrate architecture, the other nature, one the secular, the other the sacred, the worldly and the godly, the self-referential and the adherent, the refined and the precious, the sophisticated and the crude. Again, Thales did not want only to measure, but to measure the height of the pyramid. The interest then is to design, cut, divide, set boundaries. In respect to the irreversibility of a cut, we find a relation of design to drama. Drama, which takes its principle to be that of act or action, which, to revisit Polti, if taken abstractly, may be thought of as the shock of two forces, the conflict of two beings. It consists, to consider it by halves, that is to say, each of these two beings in an impulse, in an act, in a simple movement. It is in this respect that we can consider conflict, which in its simplest conception requires at least two or a division. It is no wonder then that in any so-called dramatic situation we find at least three roles, at least two put into communication by the third, which often both splits and conjoins them. This dramatic conception is in architecture possibly most often manifested with the wall. Shakespeare as if confirmed it when in A Midsummer Night's Dream, in the play within a play, he conceived of a character, a mechanical, who announces his transformation into another one named Wall, played by an actor who stretches his arms wide and stands between two others, symbolizing a wall between their gardens, a separator, but also their connector, as the two, in an attempt to overcome the split, speak to each other through the holes in the wall, that is, through the space between the fingers of the actor cum architecture. At the bottom of the conception of character, writes Polti, we find nothing solid but the idea of action. Characters are what they do. They are what is produced by the collision of agents or forces of differing directions. Most commonly, one calls character that which moves visibly, embodied by possessed mobile actors. The situation one refers to as that which is in between them, or that which they are in, which is not seen, but one says that it develops, so it moves too. It is no wonder then that this and its inversion is the conception of the two principal dramatic categories, tragedy and comedy. In one, situations change, while the character stays the same. In the other, situation stays the same, while the characters change. Conflict, as originally implied, is to strike together. Temperament is the product of such a collision. In it, one can no longer distinguish the character from the situation. They are but one thing. We observe it one way, as it all did, and it is for the situation to determine the character. Another way, and the conflicting wills of characters give rise to a situation. This is all to say that what we see in portraits are no characters, but rather likenesses. Were characters not a matter of action, the same would be done or seen in drama too. But in drama, there is an undulation produced by the action of encounter. Paths cross, one hits another, and undulating pitch effects. Things encounter other things. A dramatist would say that even the scenes with many characters on stage are, in essence, scenes of two people meeting. The presence of bands of fairies in a scene in Shakespeare's Dream does not prevent that scenes being mainly the encounter of king and queen. In the coincidence of things is pre-character and pre-situation. Polti devised 12, but also 36 of such. First he called characters, the second situations. But after a reading of the necessary roles prescribed for any one of those situations, one sees that they are but collisions, elsewhere referred to as characters. In the unobserved coincidence, one is not able to make ontological distinctions between that which coincides, or not yet. In it, both are unrevealed, and it is their coincidence that calls into question the divisions in classical dramaturgy. We might discover here that both of what we call character and situation are but the observed as character and the observed as situation, while as a result of the action they issue from, they are but its one harmonic product, elsewhere called temperament. Dramatic plot need not be seen but heard, Aristotle says in Poetics. Plot should be constructed in such a way that even without seeing it, anyone who hears the events which occur shudders at what happens. It is there, in dark, that we discover the harmonic nature of character, situation, plot, or drama itself. On the other stage, analogous to this one, are Polti's geometric distinctions, in light. One of the principal aspects of the dramatic plot is recognition. Dramatic activity, transformation, involves time, recognizing, or knowing again, even replaying, sensing again that which is unaffected, which is known because it has been sensed already, that which repeats. In the origins of arts, Aristotle sees the natural delight, pleasure, in mimesis, then in seeing images that are an imitation and thereupon working out what each thing in them is. If one happens not to have seen the thing before, he tells us, it will not give pleasure as imitation. This, as representation, is of time, recognition, imitation, a repetition, that which oscillates. Another aspect of the plot is reversal or inversion, a change to the opposite in the action. This, judging by the examples Aristotle puts forth, is an inversion of the point of view among that which we see conflicted in geometry, but disclosed through a change in perspective only in the order of time. The direction which one follows clashes with the opposing one of another character. Probability and expectation, according to what is repeated, play a key role. Another aspect of the plot is experience, enduring, undergoing an action, the irreversibility of the lived time. Dramatic activity and transformation involve these variants, in which we find repetition or cyclicity, sequentiality or order, and irreversibility. That is, we find aspects of time. Plot stands for the completeness of dramatic time. Plot is complete, or otherwise it is not a plot. With Aristotle, we can go as far as to say that the plot stands for the imitation of a complete whole action, with capital A, which even possesses a certain magnitude. This magnitude is not the one of the length of time that can be readily held in memory, such that the whole can be deliberated, but more importantly, the one in which stretch the changing fortunes with respect to the goals or wants, adjoined to and identified with situations, characters, or simply events in which they are observed and in which they move away and toward that which they strive for. Plot is also the organization of events such that they conjure up a whole. And character, not more than that, in respect to which we say that the agent is of a certain kind. Drama, then, is not an imitation of persons, but of actions and of life. Aristotle says, well-being and ill-being reside in action, activity, not in a quality. People possess certain qualities in accordance with their character, but they achieve well-being or its opposite on the basis of how they fare, make way, go, or simply do. The imitation of character is not the purpose, therefore, of what the agents do. Character is included and along and on account of the actions. So the plot is what drama is there for, and this is the most important thing of all. In his principal distinctions, it is plot that is the source of drama. Character is second, and reasoning, the speech which the agents use to argue a case or put forward an opinion, is only third. Fourth is diction, then comes spectacle, in which he sees more dependence on the abilities of property managers than of poets. But even spectacle is not the last. Lyric poetry is. Plot is often confused with reasoning, understood as a series of causal links. It is also confused with story, for which all one needs is a supply of incidents and the word "and." A dramatist would say that a story or a narrative is a chain of events. Its workings of astonishment and suspense are, in fact, primitive. They go hand in hand with an interest in matters of violence, gossip, scandal, casualties, catastrophes. Like in the Arabian Nights, all one has to do is astonish with telling an incident, and in the listener is produced an active desire to know the following incident. There is no whole, no beginning and no end, no plot, no metaphoric cycle. A dramatist would say, if you want to attract the attention of the audience, be violent. If you want to keep it, be violent again. Not to say that a plot of magnitude cannot contain anything like this. It can. Incidents placed orderly, chronologically, do produce characters and situations, but one would have to follow such an order not long to notice that, although the figures do acquire characteristics, no whole emerges simply, and to be left with precisely and only that, an ordered list of discrete scenes or incidents. Clearly, the whole is not unified inasmuch as the actions in a play are related to one person or one character. It is unified by the code that encrypts all the ones of all the characters, their chords into a single one, a single movement, impeded itself on the way, and whose aim can change, but whose achievement, if it is the one of a plot, occurs necessarily, unlike those of the characters. Characters that do not achieve their goals are unlike the Aristotelian poets, which must establish communication by way of metaphor brought about by the plot. The primacy in drama Aristotle gives radically to the plot, which he calls the imitation of the action. He does not say much about that action, other than that it itself consists of imitations of actions of life, which constitute a unity. But that is already enough. The unity is the one of the completed cycle of a metaphoric activity. The plot is that action. It is not any one of the parts of the play, characters, their enactments, etc., but of the makers of plays, who establish communication with the audience using imitations of particular actions, and who hold these when the metaphoric cycle is fulfilled. Therefore, a play that achieves this but ends seemingly abruptly does so once having established the one unified action of the plot, which itself can be anything but is in part geometrized in the scene, imitated actions of primarily characters, and in part heard in primarily situations, although it itself is not an imitation of any action of life, and this is why, for Aristotle, it is clear that the poets must be makers of plots, not of verses. Drama is transformation for a dramatist who would even go as far as to say that ways of understanding transportation of structures brought about by a metaphor occurs as one moves from one stage to another, that the homologous relation ensures that learning in one promotes learning in the other, and that what is transformed in dramatic action is learned. Plot is first heard, then seen, Aristotle says, visualizing the action, visualizing what is happening. The intrigue of the plot is then in revealing, staging, putting in light that which is dark, hidden from vision, in transforming it into what can be seen. Chances are that the two stages of this double are anything but in a casual relationship, that, to begin with, metonymies, contiguities, analogous similarities are needed. Chances are that it takes a metaphor to complete that whole movement. Aristotle's comments in Poetics show metaphor, for him the most valuable feature of poetic language, as a form of dramatization, and dramatic plot as the expression of such metaphoric activity. Metaphor, or thinking dramatically, is a whole, but a whole which is double, not dual or oppositional, but parallel. The stages are analogous, and the complete action of the plot transforms from one of that double into the other by way of code at work in between them. Polti says that classics well knew that one does not create new characters, only plots or symbols. For the most, he says, and for many writers, a character is constituted, even firmly established, as soon as 3 or 4 characteristic aspects are shown, connected with one another by the thread of a logical idea relating them in cause and effect. Tragedy and comedy, on the contrary, exist but to demonstrate how sad and ridiculous a thing it is to be but one poor character, but one ankylosed attitude. It might very well be that the overwhelmed architects of our time must learn exactly that, to code. That this might be a way out of being a class of a poor classification, the so-called professional type of the Greek middle comedy or the comedy of manners. That is, a way of being only that, characters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, I would like to offer you possibility to make some questions, if there are any. Yes, Vera, we need a mic.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
Why the parallelity?
In the...
Why just the parallelity?
Oh, just?
You said, yeah, so it's not a, what did you say? It's a double, it's not a duplicate? You said more differentiations, and you rested with just the parallelity. This I don't understand.
Yeah, I'm speaking of what I would call 2 stages, the one, or let's say 2 domains, the one of the heard and the other of the seen. Parallel in the sense of being analogous, it's a synonym for analogous, and dual in the sense of running in parallel, being a part of the whole, but not being in an opposition. So dual but not oppositional, therefore not inverses of each other. This is basically it. But in fact, it's a very simple sort of thought or an idea that I have of action, and why action is precisely that which everything in drama is encoded, or with which everything is coded. Everything in drama is encoded in actions. It is precisely, my hypothesis is that it is precisely because actions are both heard and seen at the same time, and that these 2 domains are of a high value for such an art. And I think probably for architecture as well. Any action can be heard and seen at the same time, and this allows for, I think, sliding from one domain to the other where it is, or when it is sort of needed, or when it is, lack of a better word, simply more suitable. Yeah.
Because the analogy or analogia as a relation is a proportion. So it involves 4. But then when you say it's a parallelity, would the 4 or the proportion be on the level of where the coding can play in order to keep the 2 lines in parallel? And the 2 lines are the action which unfolds from the conflict of one ratio which cannot be whole. Or I don't want to project too much into this.
I see what you mean, and it is so that for any action you do need 2, and if the 2 then are split by the 2 domains, one would think of 4, right? I see. Yeah, I don't think that I'm that far ahead really in now. Yeah, I think a lot of work needs to be done still. Yeah.
It was a great lecture. Thanks.
Yeah.
Maybe other questions from? I would like also make comment on your lecture or question one, let's say rather isolated declaration of you regarding Michelangelo's library, and then after pointing on the plot as a maker of dramaturgy. Maybe they match each other, maybe they're not. But my question would be, is it about the abstraction in these processes?
Is it about?
Abstraction. Let's say in library, since in the library you have also rather, let's say, traces of sculptural work of Michelangelo, which is rather embodied in this kind of architecture, not at all in that sense abstraction on any kind of imagination. It is that expression of, let's say, embodied knowledge of him. That's mostly what the critics are pointing out in that library. But then reconnecting it to the plot in drama, it is always, or is it a plot at all? Because you can dramatize any possible situation without having, let's say, in a classical sense, as you describe it, plot, by having some features, let's say, actor who can potentially take a pen and make out of it drama by just acting and having this also embodied knowledge toward the object or situation. So it wouldn't be a plot in that sense.
Yeah, no, I do not think of Michelangelo as a plot maker, really, at least not with the project that I mentioned. I think that there is a distinction between drama and melodrama, and it's quite a vast one. Exaggeration is, I think, a principal feature of melodrama. And plot, or let's say metaphorical cyclicity, would for me be the main feature of drama. In this sense, Michelangelo is someone, if you read his project for the library, the vestibule as the staircase, as the exaggeration, the way the staircase is being sort of blown out of, let's say, proportion, it is quite clear that this is a sort of melodramatic reading, that drama is to exaggerate. And I do not think that this is so. I do not think that one can dramatize anything. I do not think that this works like that. It is simply that, yes, act is, or action is the stuff of drama, but it is in as much a stuff of drama as letters, or I don't know what, characters, or let's say words are of any writing. So it is the metaphor, I think, in the plot that makes the distinction, and I'm not sure if I would see Michelangelo there. At least I haven't thought of him in such a way. It's rather a kind of a...
But it may be a very interesting point. Let me try, I'm not actor. Without doing this melodramatic distinction. Mm-hmm. I'm just doing a small gesture without being melodramatic.
You tell me when you're done, yeah?
So I, in a way, brought you to a reaction as a defense, and this is not at all about the plot in a classical sense, but there is really interesting to integrate it in your idea of the plot, as you are like historically putting it out, this very precise moment of, in German one would say, Gegenwart moment.
Yeah, drama is always now. That is so. Yeah. That's why it is written in present tense, often present simple tense. I'm still struggling to understand your gesture. Was it the one of encounter? Was it the one of...
The idea was just to show that you are put in the situation where you somehow need to react
Right.
without plot. So the situation in itself was by, I don't know if it's by occasion, but anyway provoked.
Planned.
Yeah.
By you. Yeah. Yeah, but I think this is life, what you are discussing, and I think that there is a distinction between artifice and light, or let's say poetry and life, and I don't think the two should be confused. It is so that I think drama, yeah, it is interested in all of life probably, and maybe architecture is as well. I do know that it does source from life or from actions of life and uses those actions as its stuff. Precisely, I think probably simple reason would be due to recognition. We can recognize and identify with it. I don't think there's much more. I'm not sure if life can be dramatic.
No, I'm rather very surprised by your, let's say, all your lecture, and I have very much to reflect on it. Thank you very much. Maybe there are other observations or questions. Yes?
I'm really interested and really intrigued by that. Oscar Wilde famously says, every little action of the day makes or unmakes character. And I think we find this to be true. But I'm also interested in what you make of the reverse being the case, that character makes every little action or inaction of the day. Is Hamlet because he can't bring himself to avenge his father's death? Or can't Hamlet bring himself to avenge his father's death because he is Hamlet? He is encoded by other factors in his makeup not to be able to act. I mean, he acts, of course, but he also does not act. Or similarly, if you take plays that don't have a plot in the traditional dramatic sense, such as a Beckett piece, such as Waiting for Godot or Endgame, is it the inability or the incapacity to drive a plot, to have a story that makes the character, or is it the characters that make them, makes their situation incapable of being driven into an action that we would understand as a dramatic plot?
The way I work out a distinction for myself between what is already a character and that which is not a character yet is that I call the previous, so the other, I call it the other two character, or did I say not the other two character, that from that which acquires characteristics or that which becomes character figure. I would rather say that the figures are those that have goals or desires, even if it is the one for revenge, regardless of any specific one, and that it is this direction, or let's say it is this desire, the want for revenge in this case, that makes the figure start moving, making steps, and therefore acting, performing actions that result in characteristics, and it is then in time that the character is acquired. So character is always of time, while the other thing that I call figure perhaps would be rather a kind of geometric notion. It is out of time, it is unaffected. It is perhaps the actor. Yeah. I don't know if that goes in the...
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to geometrize in a sense, as you spoke about it, the plot, but not too early. Then you cut away the possibility to make amplitude in this value. I think this is very important in your thinking.
Yeah, I think this is probably the reason why drama is first written. It's first a script. It is heard first.
So we can go to the next panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.